broadcasting us live to YouTube. It's going to take just a second for me to get all the tech stuff going before you can go ahead and open it. I'll let you know when I'm ready, Catherine. Okay, I've got all my tech ready, so you're good to go as soon as you're ready.
Thank you. And this is the continuation of the hearing for CU SPR ADJ DAP DR 21-05. The hearing is now open. I don't believe that we need to go through the criteria again, but I can if that's the preferential route. Okay, in that case, it looks like I am in receipt of a amended or supplemental staff report. So if the staff has a presentation they'd like to put on, they can do that now.
All right, thank you and good evening. I don't have a presentation planned this evening. So we left our December 22nd hearing with the applicant wanting to provide some additional information in response to staff's report recommending denial for the consolidated application. We have since received some information from the application or the applicant. So our supplemental staff report we issued today kind of addresses some of the points in the site plan review application. Going through that, there's some key areas where the site plan has changed from the original submittal. The driveway to State Street that staff noted doesn't meet the approval criteria in city code has been removed from the site plan. We did note that there may be some fire department access requirements that the applicant would need to demonstrate that they meet at the time of building permit. Otherwise, there's no real objections to the revision there, removing the driveway access onto State. The applicant has provided a pedestrian pathway on the east side of buildings 23 and 28. That was missing from the original submittal. So that brings the plan into conformance with our pedestrian access requirements. So you have no further concerns on that one. The bicycle parking location is changed to be within 50 feet of a primary entrance. Again, no concerns there. The applicant has added some additional windows and habitable rooms on their building elevations, again, in compliance with our multifamily design standards. So we had no concerns with that. Just before the hearing, in response to the supplemental staff report that staff sent out, we did receive another updated site plan from the applicant. Just received. We want to make sure that's included in the record. I think I have that here. I can share my screen, go over this real quick.
To clarify, this is the new site plan that's in the applicant's letter dated January 26, 2022 that was received around 5:15 today.
Correct.
Okay,
Yep.
I have that as well. Thank you.
So this site plan here does further clarify the applicant's plan on providing a buffer between the multifamily use and the retail component to the site here.
All right.
Yeah, it shows where the property line is. It shows a fence being provided. It shows landscaping. It addresses one of the concerns with compatibility that staff raised with the multifamily use and the commercial use, sharing a parking area. So it does provide some clear boundaries there. I'm not, I think, going on record green lighting this as meeting all of our standards. So I think staff would appreciate some additional time to do further evaluation of this, make sure this does indeed meet our standards. So we do ask that the written record be left open, that staff can provide a written response following the hearing. So that, I think, covers some of the issues with the site. The applicant has also provided an argument that the proposal here is needed housing, citing the ORS and citing that staff is limited in what kind of approval criteria we can apply to a needed housing application. Again, the argument just came in from the applicant shortly before this hearing. Staff hasn't had a chance to really fully vet and respond to the issues raised by the applicant. Again, we're hoping that the written record could be left open for 7 days for staff to provide written response to the applicant's additional testimony.
On that note, for the needed housing, I'm looking at ORS 197-303 for the definition of needed housing that was cited in one of the applicant's supplemental documents. It looks like it says that needed housing specifically relates to land zone for residential use or mixed residential and commercial use. Do you happen to know what this particular piece of land is zoned at right now, and if that would apply?
That's one of the concerns that we really want to take a closer look at in addressing our written findings. So the property is zoned retail commercial. It's a zone that does allow commercial uses. It doesn't allow as a permitted use residential uses. That's why we have the conditional use permit. So I think it's a zone that recognizes that in some cases residential uses could be allowed in these zones as long as it's compatible with the surrounding area. So our initial thought here is that the needed housing provisions don't apply to land that's zoned commercial that doesn't allow for residential uses outright. We want to explore the LUBA record. We want to see if there's anything that they've weighed in on to give us further direction on how to apply this to zones that don't allow outright residential uses.
Okay. Relatedly, so I'm noticing in this new site plan, I know it was submitted relatively close in time to this hearing. However, it was also on the second site proposal that was submitted, if you happen to notice it. It looks like there is parking that's been removed from this site plan, specifically parking that was along the western side of the block that had building 29 on it. Is there a change to the application that is going to be needed concerning parking requirements? I don't know if you happen to know that off the top of your head, but that's just something that I noticed.
It is one thing that we'll look at and we can provide response to. We'll look at and make sure that the maximum parking requirements are met, given the limits of the property here, not including the commercial piece on the other side of the fence.
Okay. And I'm also looking at this new site plan, how the access off of Green Crest has been classified as an easement, and if that easement and the parking that is along that access point is going to be impacted in terms of whether that counts towards the necessary parking requirements for this development.
It's one thing we may want clarification from the applicant on. The original site plan did have limits of I think work or scope for the initial phase. I'm not sure if they're planning on constructing parking with this initial phase, or if it's simply just the driveway built to that. So we don't have a site plan review application yet for the commercial piece. The parking layout and how it relates to a driveway would be reviewed for conformance with our code at that future submittal date. So I don't think these spaces are part of the application, but we can get some clarification maybe from the applicant.
Okay, I just see comparing the first site plan versus this new one, it looks like the lot line has been changed, so that potentially impacts that. However, I just feel like I remember looking at the initial staff report that there were potential concerns about parking. However, at this point, because there's been so much additional information, I don't know what's been impacted in that respect.
Right.
All right. I don't believe I have any other questions of staff right now. So if there's anything you wanted to add.
So again, we request that the written record be left open. We did get a time extension from the applicant previously. If we were to leave the record open for 7 days for additional comment, and then a 7-day period following that for the applicant to provide final written argument, a 14-day extension of the 120-day deadline would be appreciated.
Okay, I'll talk to the applicant about that when it's time for their presentation before I make that decision, but I do note that your request.
Thank you.
So in that case, we'll move to the applicant's presentation. However, because there's been a request for the record to remain open, I just want to deal with that now. So it looks like the city's asked for the 7 days. I'm not going to ask if you're waiving written or your final written argument now, but in terms of a 7-day request to have the record left open, is 7 days sufficient on your end, or would you like the full 14?
Joseph Schaefer here. As we understand it, the staff would like to have 7 days in order to respond to this latest site plan and letter, and we're fine with that. Our preference would be that we just have a 7-day rebuttal period after that. Should be adequate as compared to the typical 777.
Okay. In that case, what we can do then is we'll classify that as 7 days for the city to submit their argument, and then 7 days for your rebuttal period then. I'm not sure if we need to classify that as you waiving final argument then. I think what we can do is just say the 7-day rebuttal period for the city for their for them to submit stuff, and then the 7 days just for the applicant.
Right, so we have a total of 14.
Right, but that way it's exclusive to city, and then the city can't come in during your rebuttal period to try to add new information.
That works for me. However, I would like to ask Ms. Kaltwasser, who's here on behalf of the Neighborhood Association. Susan, are you familiar with how these record things work and what we've been talking about?
Yes, this isn't my first rodeo. So I did want to make a couple of comments.
So you're going to have a chance for comments specifically related to this application after the applicant. But in terms of the record remaining open, I guess we can just kind of deal with that right now. If the neighborhood associations would like more than the 7-day period that the city is asking for, we should just probably clarify that now so that we can get everything set out.
Okay, so the Neighborhood Association is having a meeting on February 3rd. And this is all new information that I'd like to be able to present to my board.
Okay, in that case, I think the best thing to do then is we're going to do the full 14-day record period. During that time, any party can submit additional information. And then once the applicant has presented their presentation on this application, I assume that they will be asking to have final written argument as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank
That
you.
sounds okay. That'll be the best way to go about this. It seems
Yeah.
like the cleanest.
Okay,
So in that case, Mr. Schaefer, then if you want to go ahead with your presentation.
thank you, Madam Hearing Officer. And Aaron covered many of the highlights, and so I won't repeat those. I'm going to take a few minutes and talk about the history of the evolution of the project and why this is residential and not commercial, as the city seems to have liked. And then I'm going to talk a little bit more about the site plan changes. First, though, while it's fresh in memory, I'm going to respond to a couple questions that came up during Mr. Panko's presentation. Initially, this zone definitely allows both commercial and residential use. That is not in dispute. And therefore, in our view, it is subject to 197.303 sub 1. And Mr. Tromke is going to explain to you a little bit about why, even if that definition is not met, it's still subject to a different statute on housing. Secondly, the parking for commercial, okay? As Mr. Panko said, the commercial development is not in for site plan approval at this point. These are just conceptual grayscale drawings. The parking that used to be, as the hearings officer noted, west of building 29 has been eliminated. That is correct. And if it turns out that the commercial building can't be approved on that site as drawn today, we're not worried about that. We're not trying to get approval for that tonight. The 26-foot wide access easement that's illustrated there on the throat leading in east from Greencrest is there because it was something that Mr. Panko noted in his supplemental report today that, there'll need to be an easement, but an easement isn't shown. So we just illustrated that. There's no actual change to the alignment of that throat and how it crosses the commercial area to get into the residential area. We've heard discussion in the staff report and a little bit tonight about potential conflicts between a residential drive aisle and commercial parking. What we haven't heard is a code section that addresses that. And perhaps later there is one that Mr. Panko can describe, but we're not clear on what a particular provision we are violating. Again, this zone clearly allows both residential and commercial uses. The residential uses can only be subjected to clear and objective criteria. So mixed uses and mixed use projects have inherent conflicts and friction. Much for many, many decades, land use planning was all about separating uses into different zones to avoid those conflicts. In recent decades, land use planning has changed to kind of create denser cities, and that means mixed use, and that means there are inevitable frictions between commercial and residential uses. And so we need to see and would like to see the code section that talks about these parking and drive aisle conflicts, if there is one. Okay. Now, getting back to what I said I was going to talk about regarding some of the background from when this project began and that annexation conceptual site plan that showed all that commercial. That site plan also showed an access from this site into Cordon Road. And subsequently, in discussions with Marion County, which has jurisdiction over Cordon Road, that access was strongly disfavored. And perhaps it goes without saying, but without access to Cordon Road, there's not going to be any commercial there. In addition, we submitted a couple days ago extensive evidence regarding the lack of demand for commercial space. The evidence is in the form of 2 letters from brokers that make a few key points. One is that you generally don't have retail out on the edge of an urban area. 2 is there is plenty of surplus commercial space in Salem right now. 3rd is, between the pandemic and Amazon and other e-commerce, the demand for brick and mortar retail space is not anywhere near what it was anticipated to be when the annexation concept plan was put together. On the traffic, we have I forgot one thing. There's a 3rd letter from the property owner, Jeff Bivens, East Park LLC, talking a little bit about their efforts to market the property for commercial. The developer does commercial projects. We've got commercial projects that we're doing for them right now. And they like to do commercial because generally speaking, the land value is higher and they can make more money. But here, they floated commercial for several years and only got 1 taker. And so this little site that you see grayed in there at the southwest corner is designed for the 1 interested tenant. So that's really all the demand that there is in the marketplace.
So just to pause really quickly, what grayed out corner are you referring to? Is it on the most recent site plan, or I'm just trying to follow along with what you're describing?
Yes. Yeah. It's at the northeast corner of the intersection of State and Greencrest.
Okay, I see.
Yeah.
Is that so? The buildings 16, 15, and 14 is what I'm seeing right there? Or those look like apartment complexes. So I'm just.
Yeah, below that, I don't know if you can see someone is swinging their cursor around what I'm
Okay.
talking about there.
Yes, I see. I see. It's right above the easement. Okay.
Yeah, above and below the easement, okay? So that's designed for a specific user in mind. Accompanying those letters, we've submitted a healthy stack of current real estate listings of properties for lease, retail properties for lease in Southeast Salem. Putting all that together, we think there is substantial expert evidence that there simply is no demand for the space shown on the annexation concept plan, which is now 11 years old. The other piece that I sort of hinted at a little bit before regarding the access is traffic. We have a letter in the record from Todd Mobley, a traffic engineer, describing that if it was built out for commercial, using the standard metrics from the ITE trip generation manual, the project would generate an additional 4,000 trips per day. None of the traffic studies that have been prepared for the East Park PUD included that commercial traffic. All the traffic studies for the PUD as a whole, and then subsequent kind of tune-ups and special questions that we're having our traffic engineers deal with. I can explain those if you'd like. Presume this would be residential. So to make it commercial, we're going to add over 4,000 trips a day to the neighborhood. In our opinion, that would only exacerbate the conflicts between residential and commercial use that the original staff report in particular was concerned about. So while we don't think you're going to be able to apply those subjective criteria about compatibility with the surrounding area and so forth and so on, even if you do apply them, we think they are satisfied because the surrounding residential areas are better off with apartments and lower traffic than they would be with commercial and additional traffic.
So relatedly, obviously the original staff report keyed in on the lack of commercial in this particular area. Do you happen to know what other commercial commodities are available to, if this apartment complex were to go through, what the closest commercial options are for these new residents would be? So I know just in terms of trying to hit on livability and the related criteria for the conditional use permit.
I can't point to you precisely. They would be approximately 1 mile west where you hit the Lancaster corridor.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Yeah, and we'd be happy to put some more evidence in for that, and I'll make a note to do that. Okay. Mm-hmm. And then just as an example of a point, we've been working closely with the city's traffic people. The city has traffic jurisdiction over State Street. The county has traffic jurisdiction over Cordon Road, which is the east boundary. As part of the project, the applicant is upgrading Cordon Road to a 5-lane section, or at least half of the 5-lane section. And the signal at State and Cordon is being upgraded to accommodate a 5-lane by 5-lane section. And Mark, jump in if I missed a lane. And same with Auburn Road. So if the city is now going to turn around and insist that we put in commercial that would generate another 4,000 trips, that, from our perspective, would conflict with the PUD approval that the city has already issued and that we are already vested for. A great deal of effort and expense has gone into designing those intersections. We're close to getting a development agreement inked with the county for them. Again, the city's own traffic engineers have been part of that process, particularly with regard to the intersection at State Street. And so for the city to now, kind of come in at the last minute and say, hey, there's this annexation concept plan that you guys forgot about and that needs to, show these 10 acres as commercial. From our perspective, that's a little bit late to be throwing that out there because it conflicts with the PUD approval. The last item of evidence that we submitted into the record were a series of documents regarding the city's housing needs analysis. This comes back to the needed housing question. The city's housing needs analysis found a deficit of 207 acres of multifamily housing. And from our perspective, that means that this housing fits neatly into that analysis, and that was done by the city for the city through a consultant. So our client, East Park LLC, is very active. We are building 324 apartments right now, about 5 or 6 miles north of here, next to the North Star project. We are purchasing another property immediately north of that. Maybe there's an intervening property where there's probably going to do about another 180 or so apartments. There is nobody in Marion County building more affordable apartments than our client. They're doing it through different business entities. I&E Construction is the sort of overarching entity. And that's their business. That's what they do. They've done projects like this around the county. We have assisted them with a similar project, smaller scale, in Silverton, one up in Clackamas County in Molalla. We are working on one that's, I think, 157 units, give or take, in Woodburn, also in Marion County. So this is what we do. It is needed housing. The state has changed the rules on that, which Mr. Trumpy can explain to you, about 4 or 5 years ago, so that all housing is classified the same way as needed housing for purposes of what standards can be applied. And we see time and again, many jurisdictions like Salem simply have not updated their code to keep up. That is a very common situation when the legislature changes the land use laws, because when they change the land use laws, they don't send out money for everyone to go through the exercise and the work necessary to update their codes. So that is something we're very familiar with. Our office represents many cities. Mr. Trumpke himself represents the city of West Lynn and the city of Troutdale and the city of St. Helens and a few more that escape me right now because I don't work so much on that side of the floor. But this is a common problem, and the state legislature, as well as DLCD and LCDC, have been moving quite aggressively in recent years to clear barriers to housing. And this is a situation that, in our opinion, falls within that very clearly. So the city's housing needs analysis and some follow-up documentation, all city documents that we obtained from the city with Mr. Panko's help, some of them were added to the record. So with that, I won't add anything more on that sort of conditional use side. I will just say I guess I'll stop for questions before I point out one more thing about the site plan. Does the hearing officer have any questions about this piece?
I have questions, but I would like for you to finish the entirety of your presentation before I go into those.
Okay, sure. I'm just going to speak in detail about the change down to the east side of the commercial. Is there a way, Aaron, that you could enlarge the site plan down there to show or remove the boundary between the two?
I also have a copy on, okay, that'll work too, Aaron. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So where the former driveway access to State Street was has been closed, as Aaron said. The former sort of north-south boundary between the residential and the commercial has been moved to the west. I forget the dimension, but let's call it 40 feet. Okay, so you have more apartments in there. Okay, the apartment buildings that are right along State Street, one of them has been widened, so there's an additional 6 units of apartments there. And that's the primary use, you might say, of that square footage that we gained by closing the driveway. Then the staff was concerned about the pedestrian connection into the site, leading north from State Street into the site and by our community building that previously crossed the drive aisle. So we have closed that drive aisle, put in 10 feet of landscaping on the west side of the pedestrian walkway, along with the 6-foot fence, as per the code sections cited in the staff report. So this will create, in our view, a generous buffer between the residential uses there, building 1 and building 28, and the commercial use to the west. And that's all I had to say, but of course we welcome questions.
I'm also looking at the most recent version of the site plan. It looks like there's a lot line adjustment related to these commercial buildings. So it sounds like you are doing the development behind both all the properties that are commercial as well as this apartment complex. Is that right?
Yeah, same developer.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure, because with the lot line adjustment, in terms of agreements between property owners, I wanted to make sure that that was actually something that was feasible in the suggested adjustments.
Yes, and just to clarify, the same developer, East Park LLC, is the property owner. They also own the entirety of the East Park PUD, so all the single family that lies north and west of what you see on your screen.
Mm-hmm. So that would be the property development off Stella once that's going in?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. There's about, maybe Aaron knows, but I think it's about 680 single family lots. North of these apartments is likely to be a city park on the east side of Stella, between Stella and Gordon. There's also a very large regional sanitary sewer pump station. This part of town is low-lying in the topographic sense, and in coordination with the city and the county, because the area to the north of the project is still unincorporated. It's urban but unincorporated. And so the applicant was asked about building an oversized pump station to serve not only, these roughly 1,000 or 1,100 housing units, but also a larger area of the community. And so that's all going in north of here.
So this is a question, or I suppose a request, both for you and Aaron, related to arguments that are being made tonight. But I would like to be provided with the authority that designates the zoning for this property. So both what's being developed as the apartments as well as this commercial gas station property. I think that would be beneficial to see what that entire block of or plot of land is zoned as, to make this decision. Because if it is true that this is a mixed-use development, that would change the staff's analysis. If it's not, if it's just commercial, that obviously changes the impact of your argument. And I want to make sure that I'm making the correct decision and have all the information to do that.
Okay, sure. So it sounds like what you'd like to see is a zoning map in the zoning code.
I would like something to be added to the record so that it is in there and that shows what specific type of zoning this is, because relatedly, if this is just a commercial zone, my question would be if you want to have the, if you don't want to have the discretionary type criteria, why a rezone application wasn't pursued. But in that case.
Right. Okay. So we have the zoning map up here. Thank you, I assume, Aaron, for doing that. The area that is highlighted in yellow is also part of this project, the northern part of this project. And if you look, see some of the streets have been punched in there at the west side of the yellow area already. That's phase one has been platted. Phase one, I think, is 120 some lots. Okay. Then down in the area that we're talking about tonight is the light red or pink. There now it is a deep red. And that is zoned CR, which stands for commercial retail. And that allows residential use as a conditional use. So the reason why we're not applying for a zone change is no zone change is required. And the state rules do not distinguish between, residential as a conditional use or residential as a permitted outright use, or it just says, sorry, residential, you can only apply clear and objective standards. So
if you find any LUPA case law, that would definitely be helpful in that argument. Same goes for the city, Mr. Panko, if that is something that you can come up with as well.
Sure. And then we'll send you a copy of the CR code. I think all of what we're talking about tonight is in the CR zone. If you go back to the site plan, I can show you where some of that sort of mustard color RM2 is. So up in the upper left corner of the site plan, you'll see some more apartment buildings that are sort of grayed out. That is in the RM2 zone. And so that's not part of tonight's application. But again, from our perspective, a zone change, isn't necessary.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Does the applicant still have the same argument about the proposed 6-foot wall that would border, I believe, Cordon on the back side of those apartments off of Cordon? I believe the original staff report wanted a 6-foot wall. I believe there was some testimony at our last hearing related to whether or not that is a necessary condition. If that's still something that you want to contest, you can do that when you have your final written argument or during the 14-day period when the record remains open.
Well, sure, but we'll say it right now. We do not think that the city has the authority to impose that requirement on us because it is derived from a standard that is not clear and objective.
That's right. That's right. Okay.
So if the city can point us to a code provision like the one we're talking about in the southwest part of the site that says, okay, between residential use and an arterial street, there must be a 6-foot wall. We're listening, but unless there's something that's clear and objective along those lines, our position is that the city lacks authority to impose a condition that's based on a clear and objective, that's not based on a clear and objective requirement.
Okay, I thought there was testimony at our last appearance that wasn't necessarily related to a clear and objective standard, but to a different issue with that. So I didn't know if there was argument in the alternative that you wanted to present in addition to your argument about the clear and objective standards, not the
Okay.
the applicability of those standards.
Okay, and then, just so you know, it's not part of this application tonight. But as part of the approval for the PUD itself, west of Cordon Road, there is going to be a meandering path. Mark, was it 12 feet? How many feet wide is that going to be? 10? So there's going to be a very wide path and a very wide landscape strip just east of this boundary. So in terms of, buffering from the Cordon Road and so forth and so on, there's going to be more of a buffer in the right of way than you would normally see. And I'll make sure we get some evidence in the record about that.
But that could potentially also be impacted if they decide to widen Cordon at that particular point. I don't know if that's the case or not, but
okay, yeah, the right-in off of Cordon is off the table at the request of the county traffic engineering folks. So that'll be a continuous path all the way from State Street up to Auburn.
okay. In that case, I don't believe I have any other questions for you. So if you're concluded with this, you'll have the opportunity for rebuttal. Okay.
Thanks. Mr. Trompke is going to speak a little bit more about the needed housing issue.
Just one before Ed gets started. I didn't have you state your name and address for the record, and I just want to get that over with. So.
Sure. My apologies, Zachary. Joseph Schaefer, land use planner at Jordan Ramus. Our address is 2 Center Point Drive, 6th floor, Lake Oswego, Oregon, and the zip code is 97035.
Wonderful. Thank you.
For Mr. Trompke, because I allowed Mr. Schaefer's presentation to go on for an extended period of time, I'm going to ask that if he does have a presentation right now that he does not want to say for rebuttal, that it is limited to 2 or 3 minutes, because originally the applicant's presentation should be limited to 5 minutes. If that's acceptable, then Mr. Trompke can present what he has to say. And you're on mute, Mr. Trompke.
I will endeavor, but lawyers, as you know, tend to go on and on. But let me see if I can do this in 2 or 3 minutes. There are 2 issues here. One, the first is whether the housing is needed housing. And ORS 197-303 subsection 1 defines needed housing to include housing at all income levels if it meets an identified need for housing in an urban area. Here, the housing needs analysis was accepted a few years ago. We referred to it, and I believe we've placed it in the record already, and it indicates that there is a deficit in the housing, so there's a need for housing, and this housing is affordable and designed to satisfy that need, so it falls within the definition of needed housing as an attempt to fill that need. However, there is another statute, ORS 197-307 subsection 4, that applies to all housing. And it says that local governments may apply only clear and objective standards to housing. In the Lubick decision of Legacy Development Group versus the Dalles, it's cited on page 7, I believe, of my letter of this morning, not this afternoon's letter, but the longer letter of this morning. So it's Legacy Development Group versus City of the Dalles, LUBA number 2020-099. The LUBA board held that ORS 197-3074 applies to all housing, not just needed housing. And let me read on pages 8 and 9 of the decision. This was a case in which my partner, Jamie Housley, appeared. for the petitioner, but the interveners opined that there was not enough evidence to support the finding of needed housing, but they conceded even that the distinction doesn't matter for purposes of ORS 197-3074, which requires that local governments apply only clear and objective standards to applications for all housing, not just needed housing. And on page 9, Luba said that they agreed with the intervener's assessment that whether the housing development at issue would provide needed housing, as that term is defined, it is immaterial to their conclusions explained below that we won't get into for time period. And the city's decision violates 197-307 sub 4. They do cite their 2 definitions in their footnotes about what the words clear and objective mean, and I would refer the hearings officer to them. But generally speaking, clear means it's easily understood without obscurity or ambiguity, while the term objective means it exists independent of the person's mind and relates to the object itself as distinguished from consciousness or the subject. So it's the opposite of, or it is observable or verifiable. That's probably the best way to say it. It's an observable or verifiable standard. It's not subjective. And so here, there are many words in the code, and each of the sections that uses the words reasonable or reasonableness, appropriate or appropriateness, livability, compatibility or compatible, whether it is of the same character, all of those words make the code not clear and not objective. And the legislatures explicitly said that those kinds of codes cannot survive and cannot be applied. They can't be adopted or applied under the statute because they make it more expensive, or they delay the construction of housing, which is in great need and is in short supply now. And so I will stop right there because I think I've probably run my 2 or 3 minutes, and thank the hearings officer for the time that was afforded to me.
Of course, thank you. And if you wanted to add that Lupa case into the record with either the open record period or your final written argument, that would be greatly appreciated.
We will do that. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. In that case, I believe I saw a chat message that our neighborhood associate representative has left. However, at this time, it is time for the neighborhood representative's presentation on this application. So if there's anyone there, now's the time for their presentation.
Yes, our neighborhood representative has left. I believe that they will plan on submitting formal written comments during the 14-day period. They did send an email to Aaron earlier signing up for today. And Aaron, is that being entered into the record?
We will, yes, we'll enter it.
Wonderful.
Okay. And she heard how long we have open. So at that point, I don't believe she'll come back on. So is there any other testimony from the public that's in opposition to this application?
We have no more members of the public present.
Okay. In that case, is there anything that the applicant would like to add as rebuttal or just follow up? All right. So in that case, we've already established that we're going to have the record left open for 14 days. During that time, any party, including the applicant, can submit new information or documents into the record. After that time, the 7-day period for the applicant's written final argument will start. So looking at the calendar, Aaron or Zachary, would that start tomorrow, the 27th, and start the clock from that point?
So the deadlines I have going off of our regular process, the 14-day comment period would end at 5 p.m. on February 9th. Okay. And that's for general comments. And then the applicant's final written rebuttal would end at 5 p.m. on February 16th.
Okay. And it looks like our 120-day period, as extended previously by the applicant, ends 5 p.m. on May 5th.
That's what I have. And we did request an extension too for this additional comment period.
Right. Does the applicant have any objections to an additional extension? Obviously, this application is one of evolving over time as it's changed at least twice today in terms of the site plan that I've received. I don't know if it sounds like we're going to get a not a significant amount, but at least several documents added to the record at this time. I don't know if it would be prudent on your end as well in terms of appeal and or other additional time that we may need for the 120-day period. So if the applicant is in favor of an extension, I would like to hear so, but if not, I understand.
Yes, Joseph Schaefer here. We're happy to extend the deadline by the 21 days.
Okay, I think that it's a fair and reasonable extension. So in that case, I have May 5th plus 21 days. So May 26th, that's a is that a Saturday? No, I apologize. That's a Thursday. Does that sound right, Aaron and or Zachary?
That looks correct.
All right, excellent. So in that case, we have all of our dates set out. Is there anything else that anyone believes that I've neglected to address at this point before we close the hearing? All right, in that case, thank you everyone for coming. I appreciate it. I know that I'm asking a lot in some cases, but I think that this particular application needs additional attention to it, especially given the kind of arguments that are being made. Anything that you can add for me, LUBA case law or Court of Appeals case law is beneficial. Schematics as well. So for instance, not schematics, but the picture of the zoning map, that might be helpful, one for me, but also if this does go beyond me, anyone else after that. Let me see if I have any specific requests that I would like to have given to me during the open record period. I addressed the argument as to whether the zoning allows residential outright or not. It sounds like the applicant is going to be including the LUBA case law addressing housing in a commercially zoned area. If there's any other argument that the applicant would like to make, either in alternative to the clear and objective standard argument in relation to either the conditional use permit or the other applications that are or the other requests that are in this application, I would like to hear that as well. And at this point, I don't believe I have anything else. So in that case, unless anyone has anything else to add.
No, I just have a quick question about process, because we are extending the written record. And once the record is closed, you'll be making your decision separate. There won't be a deliberations meeting where you can ask clarification for anything, right? Okay,
right.
I just wanted to make sure.
No, at this point, it's all written. That's why the more that can be submitted so that I have clarification as to what the arguments are, the better, because again, I'll just be relying off of what's been presented to me in these two in-person hearing or remote hearings, the documents that are in the record currently, and then what else gets submitted as well. All right, well, in that case, this public hearing is closed, and I will be awaiting everyone's additional arguments that will be submitted to this record.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yep.
Thank you.